Yes! Title page, baby! Title card, we did it. Alright, that's credits. Okay. So first things first, the bottom center of the screen says that we've beaten 8 games in 2024. And 455 since we started doing this in 2020. Those numbers are now false. We've now beaten 9 games in 2024 and 456 since we started doing this in 2020. Let's go. All right. So this was a short, sweet, simple experience, and I did enjoy it. Let's talk about the positives. I think this game, story-wise, did a good job of... Oh, do I have to... Here, you just stay on the middle credits. I think... Okay, you're just going to fall forever. The story did a good job of being sad. I think it's a good, interesting perspective into the concept of grief from a child's perspective. I think it's a nice window into that. It is well delivered. It feels genuine. It's not hokey. It's not over dramatic. It is genuinely sad in some parts, especially if you've dealt with loss before. It is a sad game, which is what it's supposed to be. I liked the whole stages of grief thing. That's something that probably doesn't get done enough in video games. Like, I feel like I've played like 50 games where I have to battle the 7 deadly sins, or the 7 deadly sins, or part of the game in some way. Like, I've played that game dozens of times. I don't remember ever having a game with the stages of grief in it, which is a really cool, interesting concept. So I liked that. I thought that was fairly original and well done. Although the graphics technically weren't very good and there were some weird spots for sure, the art direction was quite nice. The way that it's got that storybook feel, this handwritten vibe is nice. And the mechanic with where you use words to manifest things in the reality of the game, in the reality of the story, is cool too. You can take the word break and break things in the game, or take the word burn and light a torch and stuff like that. That's cool. Word magic is what they called it several times in the game. So I thought that was cool. I'm not sure I've seen that in a game before. That was a nice another interesting original idea. As far as negatives go, I think I touched on it a little bit. Graphically, the game had some weird spots. I wouldn't go as far as to say it was buggy, but like there were parts where it was a little buggy, where it was supposed to be showing a crawl animation and she was just standing, moving forward, or like she would be on a certain part of the terrain and her sprite would be like bouncing up and down. There was a little bit of that. It wasn't that distracting. It was no big deal, but I did see a little bit of that. And I think that the game could have gone farther. Obviously, this is not a AAA production. They're probably working with a constricting budget, and I get that. But I feel like the actual graphics held back the art direction a little bit in parts where it was really supposed to look fantastical, and in those spots you've just got these kind of lo-fi polygons in some, like, making up the trees or whatever. It wasn't horrible, but it was worth noting, I suppose. I think probably for me, my biggest critique is that the game didn't really tie together the way as beautifully, I think, as it could have. It kind of, and this seems to be I'm going to try to get through this without spoiling anything, but this kind of seems to be the point, that it kind of just ends, and that seems to be intentional, but like a game like this, where you're dealing with really heavy, very poignant themes, there are some examples that I have experienced in gaming that they hit the nail on the head so hard and so beautifully at the end that it's just awesome. Before Your Eyes is a really good example of that. Superliminal is a good example of that. Games that they have a mechanic, a gimmick, but then there's an underlying theme behind it that comes through and is very... A Tale of Two Sons is another one. Where there's this moment at the end where it's just like, oh, wow, that's fucking cool. Like, you really found a way to tie this together. That just didn't happen. It didn't happen in this game for me. It's just kind of... It's more of a realistic story because of that. You know, not every real-life story is like that. But it deprived me a little bit of the real satisfaction of a satisfying ending where everything suddenly makes sense. It just wasn't a part of this. And for this game, for this type of game, I was kind of hoping that it would. I think that's my biggest critique, is that it just kind of ends, and it's doesn't really tie much together. Also, with the stages of grief thing, some of the later ones, again, I'm trying not to spoil too much, but it was a little murky. Like, there were certain characters I was like, okay, so is this thing grief, or is this thing acceptance, or is this thing despair? You know, and if you're toward the beginning, it was very clear. It was this character that was denial. This character was anger. This character was bargaining. It was very obvious. And then toward the end, it was just like, it kind of lost the plot a little bit for me. And maybe it's just because I misunderstood it, but if that's the case, I'm not an idiot. So if that's the case, like, it could have done maybe a better job of leading me there. But you know, I'm not going to rail too hard on a game like this. This is an independent experience that is, you know, took me 4 hours to beat, and it was worth 4 hours of my time as an interesting... There are definitely games that are like this, that are like, oh, we're just an indie title, 3 or 4 hours long, and it's really more about like the narrative, like walking sims or just little narrative adventures. That it's not about the combat or the RNG. It's about the themes and the main story. There are definitely games I've played that are like that are bad. Like they tried to do that, and then it just doesn't come together. A lot of them are I've played a lot of games like this, a surprising number of games like this that are just like these emotional 3 to 4 hour experiences, and an equally surprising number of them fumble at the 5-yard line. There's a bunch of those actually that just try to be poignant and meaningful and just don't do it. I think a lot of developers think they can make a game like this more cheaply and get away with not having a lot of complex mechanics in their game by just having something that's like a more meaningful story, which is true as long as your story's really bringing it. And this game, I think, brings it mostly. I think it's enough to stand on its own. The narrative experience of this game with a little bit of actual gameplay mechanics kind of sprinkled on top it's enough to carry it, which is more than a lot of games like this can say. So on the whole, I would say bravo. It's a good game. I definitely think I would say this is very middle. This is like a C+ when it comes to this kind, maybe a B- when it comes to this kind of a game. There are definitely games that, like I've mentioned a few, that are significantly better at this kind of thing. Before Your Eyes is the one that keeps coming to my head. I've heard that about That Dragon Cancer. I don't know if I want to play that game. Maybe someday. And then there are some that are just bad. Before Your Eyes is... I'm sorry. Beyond... there's a game called... It's Beyond something. It's about... You play as a blind girl that, like, her pet dies or something, and it's supposed to be like a game like this. It's, like, really sad. But it is just a bore fest because you have to play as a blind girl the whole time. And so you can't see anything on the game until you're close enough that you can see or feel or hear it. And so it's a really cool idea, but it is a nightmare to actually play. And then the ending is like, what the hell? What? It's called Beyond something. Not Beyond Good and Evil. Beyond Eyes. That's a really good example of a game that like has a cool, interesting concept, very poignant, very meaningful, very deep concept like this one, but just isn't any fun, and isn't not fun's not even quite the right word because I wouldn't call this game a lot of fun really, but it's poignant, it's meaningful, it's deep, it's satisfying in that way. There are games that are bad at that, and I think there are some that are significantly better too. This is kind of a middle of the road. But I think if you like that kind of game, if you like games like Before Your Eyes, or I don't have. There's more games like this that are like this that I can't think of right now. But there's a lot more games like this that I've played and beaten. You could do a lot worse than this game. I think you would enjoy it. It's worth playing. If you want to play a game about grief, which not everybody will, this one should be on your list. So, all in all, I did enjoy it, and I'm glad I played it. So that's it. We did it. Lost Words Beyond the Page. Thank you for allowing us to play you. I'm glad we finally got around to trying you. But we are now going to delete you from our console and never play you again. Bye. Thanks for existing.